Welcome everyone to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Kumi. Now, 25 years ago, the Federal Republic of Nigeria transitioned from military rule to a democratic system. Successive governments since 1999 had promised to improve the quality of life for Nigerians, strengthen public institutions, combat corruption, among others. Now, Nigeria's democracy has a complex history, with the June 12, 1993 presidential election being a pivotal moment. The 12th of June now represents Nigeria's quest for democratic governance and serves as a reminder of our democratic journey, with many Nigerians reflecting on the progress made and the challenges still faced, such as entrenched corruption, weak democratic institutions, struggles with insurgency, terrorism, as well as ethnic and religious biases. Now, despite these challenges, Nigeria's democracy has shown resilience, with citizens demanding better governance and accountability. On the Political Paradigm today, we x-ray 26 years of Nigeria's democracy in the spirit of the June 12 celebration. And there's a Nigerian saying that what an old man sees sitting, a child cannot see even if it climbs a tree. So let's hear from an elder statesman, one of the Northern Elders, Dr. Hakeem Baba-Ahmed, who's a former spokesperson of the Northern Elders Forum and former presidential advisor on politics. He joins me from Kaduna State. Welcome to Political Paradigm, Dr. Baba-Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. I'm just going to shoot straight because I believe you have a wealth of experience that can be tapped from. So let me shoot straight. We're celebrating June 12th, Democracy Day, the new Democracy Day. It's been new for a while now. Well, let me ask you, there are those who would argue, what's there to celebrate? So, from history and with what we have now, why should we be celebrating democracy?
We should be celebrating democracy because the options have proved completely inadequate, unsustainable, and very fragile and susceptible to disruption. We should celebrate democracy because from 1999 to date, we've had a democratic system that has survived. Now, I'm not saying it has survived perfectly, but it has survived longer than all the years we put together from, I think, unless I'm wrong, from 1966 to 1999. So we're talking about 23 years. And we should celebrate democracy because it is superior to all forms of government. It gives our people the right and the opportunity to choose who they want. It allows us, at least in writing, the privilege and the power to change leaders if we feel they deserve to be changed. And it allows governments to remain accountable to citizens. So it is something to celebrate.
Okay, so let's make a comparison now. Nigeria's democracy before and after military rule. What do you see?
There are many military rules. From 1960, when we became independent of Britain, to 1966, we had a democratic government in place, which lasted all of 5 years. We had a different federal arrangement then. Substantial, just basically we had 3, then later 4 regions. Fairly weaker center, very powerful regions. And we had a very vibrant political competition in place. We had, I think, a higher level of political consciousness than we actually have now. People were aware of what voting involved. They were more conscious about the values that they were voting to protect. You may or may not like those values, but at least people lined up 1959, 1963, 1964, and voted for something that they believed was worth their energy and their time. And it was a very challenged republic, 1960 to 1965. It was challenged by fierce competition within the regions, between the regions, at the federal level. It showed all the weaknesses of democratic systems where leadership fails to understand the values of cooperating and collaborating with each other. It was challenged by identity politics, regions, ethnic groups, religion. It was challenged by its fragility, which is which was why it was relatively easy to overthrow in 1966. So it's not by any means an ideal period, but we had a democratic system. Then we spent a huge amount of time under the military, all the time until 1983, when we had a brief return to a democratic system again. That lasted for only about 4 years. Again, unfortunately, our democratic system remained captive of the threat and the presence of the military. But still, you had a very ambitious attempt on the part of the political leadership to try and see if they could move away from more than a decade of military rule and build the foundations of a democratic system from 1979 to 1984, aspiring to build a country that would allow for competition for power, citizens who would exercise choices, and a leadership that was accountable. It had its own problem, but it was never given the chance to see whether it could work or not. I mean, by 1984, the second term of President Shagari, he was overthrown. So again, the military came back. And we never came back again to the democratic system until 1999, when the military ran itself into a closed end, dead end, and they had no choice than to allow the democratic system to come back. And the rest of the story we know. We are now celebrating 25, 26 years of uninterrupted democratic system. There are many verdicts on this 25, 26 years, but the system is still there. So if only because it survived as a system, you could say that the democratic experiment in Nigeria has been a success.
Okay, so Doctor, it's for many people, it's not about how far, it's how well. And that's why it's very important to know where we're coming from and whether we've made progress in that regard or not. So it will also be important to find out from you, because some have said that this democracy that we're practicing isn't favorable to the generality of the public. It's more for the politicians. You talked about the system that was in place before the several military interventions or military interruptions that we had. And it would be nice to know from history if that was the kind of democracy we're practicing now is the same as what we're practicing before the military took over. And perhaps we can be able to find out the root cause, hopefully, of why this democracy is being questioned at the moment.
Okay, it's important to contextualize all these comments about democracy. You cannot isolate any democratic system, any in the world, from the context in which it evolves and develops, grows, or fails to develop or grow. The first attempt, the 5 years of the First Republic, you had a democratic system that allowed Nigerians for the first time to enjoy two things. One was freedom from colonialism, and two, the right and the opportunity to build their own country themselves. They elected a leadership. That leadership was confident, actually energetic, like I said, intensely competitive. And Nigerians reacted to it in a way that suggested that Nigeria was truly on its way to entrenching democracy after colonialism. It's a major transition. Many people don't understand the challenges that were faced by the politicians who took over the country from colonialism. To move from colonialism to full-blown democracy, literally overnight, except for the gradual period of withdrawal of the British. But October 1st, 1966, well, just think about it. We had colonialism. Then you had, after that, you had thoroughly democratized governance system in Nigeria. It was a major transition. Because of the manner in which it was ended, because that ending of the democratic system subsequently went through a number of developments, and we ended up with a civil war, a brutal, horrible civil war, and then a long period of military. The history about the First Republic has become terribly confused, rather sadly, because Nigerians tend to remember only the sad part of it. They forget about the fact that we had a group of politicians who organized and took over power from the British with the confidence and the competence to run a country. And they ran it for 5-6 years. And who knows, if the military had not intervened, we may have had an uninterrupted democratic process until now. But so it's difficult to judge a 5-year period, except for the fact that it showed courage on the part of those who took over. It showed vision in many of the regions. In fact, actually in all the regions, you saw a vision. You had leaders who worked very hard, and they had a vision of what their regions would be. At the national level, then we had a leadership which had a vision of what a huge country like Nigeria was going to be. And they competed with each other, and then there was a very strong sense of what being a Nigerian was, both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. You knew a Nigerian as far back as 1960, 61, 62.
Exactly.
You knew a Nigerian, nobody saw him.
Exactly. So, Dr. Ahmed, that's one part. That's where I want to pick this up from, because as a young person or among young people, the conversation we hear, even from political leaders of today, is the good leadership that existed in time past. And it almost seems as though the current leader, the current political elite, do not care to have their names written in gold for the future. So the question is, leadership failure in Nigeria over time has led to a lot of people questioning, and I'm also talking about political elites questioning if this democracy is working for Nigeria or if it's another system. I'm sure you're conversant with the conversation of proposals for parliamentary system of government. What do you think about the calls for a different system of government?
There are calls for all sorts of government systems. Systems on their own don't make for good governance. And this is where one of the faulty arguments, one of the faults with this argument that, okay, go back to the parliamentary system, change the regions, change the states. These are arguments that are predicated on structures. People think the structure is the root of the problem. It is not. It's a human issue. It's a human problem. It doesn't matter what structure you're running. It doesn't matter what system you have. If your leadership does not accept the fact that it is leading on the basis of a mandate and a trust of its people, and that it is bound by certain boundaries about what is right and what is wrong, and there are structures and institutions and values it must respect, it doesn't matter what structure you put in place. It doesn't matter what system you put in place. Go back to parliamentary. Collapse Nigeria into 6 states, 6 zones, 20 zones, whatever. You will have the same problem. Nigeria's leadership problem is actually the problem of those who have aspired to lead, who have had the opportunity to wield power, and they have governed in their own interests rather than in the interests of the people who voted for them. So democracy is subverted fundamentally because leadership in Nigeria fails to recognize the fact that if people give you, the leader, the power to govern on their behalf, they don't give him the power to become a big man, to steal their money, to treat them as if they are just simply voters that he or she sees every 4 years, and the wealth and the resources of the people are the resources of the leader. If you have this kind of people, it doesn't matter where you put them in the best country, If the leadership has this kind of values, they will do exactly what they're doing now. Nigeria's tragedy has been that even though we had a democratic system, a key element of it has been missing. And in fact, that key element has been deteriorating. In fact, it's actually missing. That element is the idea that people elect leaders to serve, to protect their resources, to protect them, and to use their resources to build a country that is in the interest of the citizen. That has been our problem. And we appear to have been successively, since 1999, every leadership that has taken over has been worse than the previous one. I'm not too sure about whether President Buhari was worse than Jonathan, but I think that if you start from the first 7 years of President Obasanjo, I think, to be honest with you, he did pretty well. And then, as some versions of his exit say, he stalled his 7 years by trying to see if he could get an additional term. And unfortunately for him, history will record that as a major spoiler in his history. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't have the facts of that. President Erdogan came into power. You had some kind of fresh air, a youngish president, seemingly clean, visionary, strong. Unfortunately, he didn't last longer than 2 years. Jonathan took over and ran the country aground. And we fought against Jonathan because we thought Nigeria deserved a better leadership than Jonathan. We didn't realize that we were going to put in place someone who was not even going to govern at all. Jonathan governed badly. President Buhari didn't govern at all. Now you have a president who started on the 40. He says, I'm going to become president because it's my turn. You don't have a turn to run the country. It's not your turn. It cannot be your turn. But in any case, even if we forgave him for that comment, you judge the leadership today, 2 years into the life of President Tinubu's government. You judge them by their records.
Okay.
They will tell you that they are doing great. Look at all the World Bank statistics, all the international and global ratings and everything. But that's not the only yardstick by which you measure a government. You measure it by the way the citizens live, the way the citizens feel. And if that is the yardstick by which we're going to measure this administration, then clearly the Tinubu administration has failed the expectations that it was going to radically improve the quality of governance of President Buhari.
Okay.
So
Doctor, sorry, let me come in here because a number of things you've said are highly important, and it is good for Nigerians to take stock of these things. You've mentioned clearly that successive administrations since 1999 have failed. And it would be nice if you could point out the areas of failure, because there are administrations who could say that they had focus on certain areas and they improved in those areas. And then when you say that, one, the Buhari administration did not govern at all, it would be nice if you could clarify what you mean by that before we come into the current administration.
Well, take the issue of security. Now, I was involved in President Buhari's campaign for 3-4 years in his time. And towards the end of it, I was intimately involved with his attempt to get power. And we sold Buhari on basically 2 or 3 issues to Nigerians, and they bought it. Buhari was tough. We sold him as a tough, no-nonsense person who would get rid of Boko Haram and bring peace back into this country. He didn't. In fact, insecurity grew under him beyond anything that we knew. We told Nigerians Buhari is a no-nonsense guy. He hates corruption. He's not a corrupt person. He's going to fight corruption, and Nigeria will be rid of corruption. It didn't succeed. Some of the worst forms of corruption took place under him. And one of the prices we're paying for that is Tinubu's first day declaration that he's going to remove subsidies. Subsidy had become such a massive problem for Nigerians under Buhari that Tinubu must have had some idea that he was doing the right thing when he said, as of today, I'm removing subsidy. And he thought Nigerians would collapse. We all did. We clapped. But that was because we thought, great. He must have done a lot of thinking before he became president. He must have had a lot of ideas about how to mitigate the damage the suffering it will cause. Unfortunately, he didn't. He's trying to look for solutions after creating the problem. Here we are looking for a president still with 2 years to go, who would change the style of his governance, maybe show a little bit of empathy to the situation in which Nigerians live, tinker with a lot of his policies, stop waste and corruption, and address the issue of security and the poverty of the Nigerian people.
When you say tinker, Doctor, 1 second. When you say tinker with his policies within this, the second lap of his first term, what do you mean? Which policies do you think would be tinkered with that would have an immediate impact on the people?
Well, look, I can't. It would be unreasonable and I think unrealistic to ask President Tinubu, for instance, to bring back subsidy. It doesn't make any sense. He wouldn't do it, and I'm not sure that it's in the interest of the country. However, as a result of the removal of subsidy, a number of developments have occurred. One of them is that we are now getting a huge amount of money coming to the federal and state governments that should go into areas of improving security, mitigating poverty, building infrastructure, improving education, health delivery system, and giving young Nigerians hope that there's something in this country that is meant for them. So this huge amount of money, where is it going? Some of it is in Abuja, and a huge amount of it is going to state governments and maybe local governments. We don't know whether the governors are still allowing this huge, massive increase in their revenues to go to them or to go to local governments or not. We are not sure. But in any case, he can do something that will improve accountability, transparency, and openness in the manner in which this increased revenue arising from removal of subsidy and also prioritization. I looked at the 2025 budget, the current budget. By the way, we are operating 2 or 3 budgets concurrently, but I focused on the 2025 and 2024 budget. I still have it, and I have some little understanding of budget operating. It's unbelievable just how much is in that budget that represents nothing but waste and potential abuse and potential corruption. It has no relevance, no relationship with the levels of poverty and the levels of insecurity in the country. So President Tinubu could do something. He can actually push aside a lot of the nonsense that is in the 2024 and 25 budget. Focus on just 4 or 5 things. Mitigate poverty, improve security, devote a lot of time on infrastructure, and then on social development, the development of the human capital that we have. Then use the power that you have as the president, rally governors, use the powers of the president, insist that money sent to them is used judiciously. You can't control all the governors, the PDP and other parties, control their own governance. There's so much abuse of resources, so much waste and corruption going on that the ordinary citizens in this country only hear about the fact that it's a huge amount of revenue accruing to the federal and state governments, but they don't see anything. Hunger is increasing. They are more and more exposed to criminals and bandits and kidnappers. Why can't we use this money? Whatever it needs to be done, equip the military, create a state police, but you must protect the citizen. You must rid citizen of hardship.
I believe this is where checks and balances come in, and the aspect of institutions, the strength of institutions. So this brings me to the area of the challenges that democracies face. One of them is corruption. You've talked about corruption. And over time, we've seen administration after administration claim to fight corruption. So the question is, why has corruption remained entrenched in our system despite the appeal or the efforts of several administrations, if any? And it will also be nice to know what level of progress we've made since 1999 in the fight against corruption.
Well, from 1999 to 2007, I was a federal permanent secretary, and I worked in quite a number of very sensitive positions. And I can tell you, to his credit, President Obasanjo tried really hard to break the backbone of corruption that takes place within the budgetary process in this country. The word padding, which is basically legislators putting all sorts of unwanted and insertions in the budget that inflates the budget, and then after it is passed, they go behind and arrange to get those monies. It started under him, and I know that he fought very, very hard. Virtually every president had issues with stealing, using the budgetary process. Now, the more the legislators succeed and the executive arm succeeds, the more those who come from behind them realize that, hey, there is only an easy way to make a huge amount of money. If you become a legislator, you pad the budget. The president wants his budget passed, so he would let you get away with it. President Buhari, President Obasanjo tried. President Erdogan tried. I think Jonathan tried. President Buhari, in fairness to him, also tried. The reason why they failed is that from both sides, both the executive and the legislature recognize the executive arm allows the legislature to abuse the budgetary process by inserting huge amounts of money that they will be either outrightly stolen or padded. And so very little of it will be used. They call it constituency projects, they phantom projects, but they are in the budget. The executive, on the other hand, pretends that it doesn't know so that it gets its budget passed, inflating a budget. In fact, literally, they've turned our budgets into fictions. They make absolutely no sense. They have nothing to do with a plan to spend the resources of the country in a manner that addresses three things. One, that they will be accountable for those money. Two, those monies are going to the areas of genuine need. And three, nobody steals a kobo of that money.
So where are the institutions that should be checking these?
The solution,
No,
I think, is that
the institutions.
The institutions have all been corrupted. Look, between these two arms of government, between the executive and the legislature, basically everybody becomes part of that. If the president recognizes that a lot of what he wants, it depends on a legislature that says you must allow us to have this and that and that, then, and the president compromises and he says, okay, you can have that, but in return, you should also do this for me. Then it becomes a quid pro quo involving only the president and the members of the National Assembly. And we have never seen a more pliant, a more complicit National Assembly than the way we see now. And they are in that form, largely because the executive now determines who becomes the leader of the other arm of government. That is not done. You cannot have a president who will insist that he must have his Senate president, he must have his speaker, whom he must have. You cannot do that. That's why they are called independent arms of government. They are related, but they are independent. The moment you have the leadership in your pocket, they also have you in your pocket because there are things you have to go to them for. So what we have in Nigeria is the highest level of collusion between the executive arm of government and the legislative arm of government. And when you have that, then you're finished. Your democratic system is flawed beyond redemption. Unless you're actually able to now have an executive arm of government that will say, I will go by the letter and the substance of the Constitution. I'm not going to interfere and intervene with who becomes your leader.
I think it's a very interesting situation. I think it's a very interesting situation we find ourselves. The reason is the solution is practically in the hands of the people who are guilty of it. And some would argue that you would not expect them to correct a system that favors them. But there's something else, Dr. Ahmed, as we look through history. Nigeria's one of Nigeria's biggest threats to its existence and democracy is religious and ethnic bias. And we know one thing about June 12 is that it is tied to unification of religions and ethnicities with regard to how Nigerians voted, regardless of the religion of MK Abiola at the time. But those two have now become our problem. How did we allow diversity, which should be in our favor, to eat so deep into us and affect us this negatively?
By providing good governance. Nigerians are entitled to be governed fairly and justly, irrespective of what their ethnic group or their religion is. We miss the fundamental principle of a democratic system. All citizens are equal and equally entitled to the same treatment. If you can have a leadership that would actually govern all sections of this country fairly and equally, I assure you, religion, ethnicity, where you come from, geography, will become entirely, I'm not saying they're going to disappear, but they will become a lot less prominent than they are now. But when the political system becomes captive of this very destructive idea that what you get in the country depends so much on where you come from, what language you speak, what God you worship, then you have a very serious problem. So if you're going to redesign this country, you have to redesign it fundamentally as a country of citizens.
But since we returned tonight to democratic rule in 1999, when did this all start? Because some have said that nepotism didn't start under the Obasanjo administration. So when did it start?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I think we've always. I am a little bit different from a lot of my friends. The arguments I get in is that I personally don't see this business of counting how many Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo are in this
Administration,
government or not. I don't see that as an issue. I just see that as exactly the kind of thing that elites do to divide the people. If you have a good person who is governing this country, and he says, listen, I am going to govern a country of people, persons, of citizens. Now, I know they differ, but I will not differentiate between somebody from the southeast and somebody from the northeast. I will not let anybody do that. I assure you, all these arguments about nepotism will substantially decline. You will not be counting how many ministers do they have. Nobody has ministers. Ministers have themselves. The fact that somebody says, oh, the Northwest, they have 16 ministers. What do these 16 people do for us? I am from the Northwest. And I don't see how these 16 people help me as a citizen in the Northwest when I can't travel in Katsina, I can't travel in Sokoto, I can't travel in Zamfara. So many times, it's the politicians who raise these issues about nepotism. But the Nigerian doesn't really care. He doesn't really care about who is his president, who is not his president. Of course, this administration raised the issue of faith to a level it hasn't been raised before. But when Abiola did it, hardly anybody noticed that Abiola and Kingibe were Muslims. And yet they came close to winning an election. I say close to winning because they weren't declared as president. That people don't think that is an issue, but it is. Abiola was never president of Nigeria because he wasn't returned and declared by as the law required. But they could have won that election.
What do you think that he should have that June 12th should have been declared as Democracy Day then?
I think they didn't declare June 12 as Democracy Day for Abiola. I think the June 12 was declared a Democracy Day to remind Nigerians about the dangers and the threats to our democratic process. Look at this now, 2 years to go. 2 years. The president and the present administration, both at the federal and state level, have 2 years to go, for goodness sake. And suddenly, it's all about 2027. They have forgotten about governance. They have forgotten about the challenges that still need to be dealt with. They've forgotten about the fact that people don't even know that it is 2 years into the administration. They are running away from criminals and bandits and poverty. The politicians have turned our democracy into personal battles. So our politicians are not democrats. This democracy serves them. It doesn't serve the people. So I think we're missing the point about June 12. It was never intended to celebrate Abiola or Kingibe. I think it was intended to remind us, be careful. You could lose all the value in your democratic system if your politicians and the citizens and those who watch the system do not play the game the way it's supposed to be played. That is the problem.
I also think that the June 12th is a reminder to the need for an electoral process that serves the people. I'm sure you agree with that.
The electoral process is so central to the quality of the democratic process that any effort to tinker with it should be resisted by Nigerians with all the strength at our disposal. I was secretary of INEC in 2002, 2003. I was secretary of INEC when we conducted the elections in 2003, and President Obasanjo came back. Well, and I know the amount of effort that was made by the ruling party then to win elections in 4 states. In particular, PDP government then was desperate to win Sokoto, Borno, Lagos, and Kano. Literally, it was almost like a war. But we had a commission that said, if you win those states, fine and good. But the commission is not going to collude, tell its integrity, and collude with the PDP government and literally rig an election and hand those 4 states to you. And you know what happened? 2003 election, PDP won the election, but they lost 4 states. You know what those 4 states are? Sokoto, Maiduguri, Borno, Kano, and Lagos. I know the effort we fought. I know the effort we made to protect the ballot in Lagos State when President Tinubu was governor. Even he doesn't know half the story. And I've never mentioned this until now. The effort that INEC in 2003 made to make sure that we had free and fair election in 2003 was unbelievable. And he came back in spite of the most horrendous effort by the PDP government to get him out of power, to make sure that he served for only 1 term. And I was the secretary of INEC then. So you can have an electoral process, an electoral system that works fairly well. If it is corrupted, if it is compromised, then your democracy is compromised.
Is that what has happened over time now? And can you speak highly of the commission we have as it is now?
I know the chairman of the commission personally. I've known him for years. Actually, he was my student in the university. What I know of him is that he's a man of integrity. I admire his courage. I admire his strength. I don't know anybody else outside that commission. What I will say to you is that I pray to God that they allow the 2027 election to be credible, free, and fair, because so much hangs on that election, so much, more than any other election. Because what we're going to put on the burden we're going to put on INEC to make sure that the kind of dispute and arguments that we will have between now and 2027 will all be resolved by an election. Because between now and 2027, between now and August of October or November, involving sections of this country, involving the leadership and other parties, involving parties, because it is that important for this administration, Tinubu's administration, to come back. And it is this important for his opposition to make sure he doesn't come back. I don't think you are going to find a government that will fight such a battle to get a second term like the Tinubu administration. But I'm telling you, it will be the most difficult election that would have been won.
And is this
because a lot of the odds are staked against them now as we speak?
What sort of odds?
But we have to do. Massive parts of the country are massive segments of the population are unhappy because of the way they live, the cost of living, the insecurity in the country, what appears to be the distance between the government and the people, and what appears simply to be a government that just simply sings, beats its own drums and sings its own praises. It's as if they don't live in this country. And the anger is building. And we're talking about 2 years now. And so I don't see many cheerleaders of this administration, except the governors who are endorsing the president and themselves, and everybody else who has been elected with 2 years to go. 2 years of very difficult work you have to do.
How do you
Make
respond,
progress.
Doctor? Doctor, how do you respond to those who say that it may be government policies, especially subsidy removal, but it now gives more money to the states, as you have alluded to, and states are not being held accountable for how they utilize this more money that they are getting? Why should
Would
the
you hold
president
it
take the
once?
brunt of it?
Would you, if you're the president and you have a governor who endorses you 2 years to an election and says you're the best thing that ever happened to this country, 2 years to an election, would you hold him accountable?
You think it's the
Or might
president
you?
that should hold the governors to account?
Yes, certainly. And there are ways in which the president can exercise some influence over them.
For
But if he
example,
doesn't, he should distance himself. For instance, the president can say to Nigerians, listen, I have a limit to what I can do. This is how much I'm releasing to states. Please go and ask your governors what they're doing with that money. He is also a member of a party that has 21 governors. He has massive influence in his party. The party can improve and raise the standard of accountability and performance of its governance. The president isn't just a sitting duck, he's immensely powerful. The Nigerian president is one of the most powerful elected people in the world. He has massive powers. They are now all running around him. Everybody wants something from him. Why don't you say, Governor, my people tell me you're doing well, but you're not doing as well as you can. I think you should spend more money in this direction or in that direction. Or he should set some minimum standards for his governors and say, gentlemen, if we're going to win the 2027 elections, you guys have to do a lot better. Stop sending this number of people to Hajj. If I don't know how many thousands of people our governors have sent to Hajj this year. I'm not just talking about states from the north, all over, including governors, Christian states who are sending people with Muslims in their states there, all for political reasons. For goodness sake. And we know in our faith that you can't take public money and send somebody to go and campaign for you in Saudi Arabia or pray for you in Saudi Arabia. What is wrong with the president pulling some of these governors? And I'll tell you why this is going. You think they can get away with it because the president is getting away with a lot. Otherwise, you cannot have this much amount of money clustered around 21 centers and it's been wasted and abused and nothing is happening. The president has a responsibility to lead, one, by example, two, by using his full powers, calling the governors up. There must be an improvement in the manner APC governors and PVP governors, all governors. The governors have turned assets of people into private property. And there's nobody's calling them out on this.
okay, let me quickly draw your attention to what you just said, because I know I followed your tweets on X, and you had also said this and questioned why so much money has been spent on pilgrimage, which you think could go into human development instead. I like to think that this is you saying that the government should hands off pilgrimage entirely at all levels.
No, I didn't say that. I said the amount of money that we are spending, state governments are spending, sending people to Hajj, cannot be justified in the light of competing demands like mitigating poverty levels and security. It's just indefensible. And what I did in my ex tweet was to say, why don't we ask the Muslim clerics? We have honest Muslims, people who would understand that they are the inheritors of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They should tell us the truth. Is it allowed in Islam to take billions, millions, hundreds of millions or billions of public funds and send a few people to perform Hajj? Something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you should perform only if He gives you the means to go. In the light of what is going on, and with the name of what are you going to defend and justify this?
But is this not the same thing I just asked, Dr. Ahmed, where because
I know you are asking me whether
ha-
government should hand off much.
yes,
I don't think when you send 85,000 people to a foreign country on a very complicated ritual like Hajj, government should say we have absolutely nothing to do with it. That is different from using public money to send people to perform Hajj. I think that as much as possible, government's role should remain facilitatory. To protect Nigerian citizens, give them, make sure that welfare is provided for them when they're in Saudi Arabia, and bring their involvement to a minimum level. I don't think that you will harm Muslims or the Hajj, the process, the Hajj or the pilgrimage at all. But I think you can reduce the involvement of governments in Hajj and reduce corruption in the process.
All right. Dr. Ahmed, you are a member of the Northern Elders Forum. You were a spokesperson at the point. I know that the Northern Elders Forum does not endorse a candidate. And you've also talked about this President Tinubu not likely to win the next election based on his policies. Well, then again, the aspect of the options that would be available to Nigerians from the politics that's playing out now, it almost seems like the usual suspects. And some would say, perhaps, because of the influence that the Northern Elders Forum wields, perhaps you could begin to endorse candidates based on credibility and stand your ground and say, this is why I think this is the best candidate. And if leaders at all levels can be honest, at all levels, can be honest enough to, scrutinize candidates and, advise true endorsement, that that could be a way to help the country and help the electorates choose their leaders.
Let me just, you do know that I don't speak for the Northern Elders Forum anymore. I'm a member of the Northern Elders Forum, but I don't speak for them. So let me speak as a Nigerian who is from the North. I think that Nigerians should de-emphasize where the next president should come. Our next president. We have tried this business of it must be a Northerner, it must be a Southerner. It's our turn. It's not your turn. And it has all failed us. It has failed us. We have good people from the north, we have good people from the south of the country. This business of regionalizing or ethnicizing presidency narrows the field of selection so badly that it damages us. Look, we have a president from the southern part of the country now. I think he didn't become president until he created a platform and a support base that involved a huge part of the northern Muslims. My region, my zone, the Northwest, gave President Tinubu 62% of the votes that required to win the election. His region, which is the Southwest, gave him 23%. We gave him 35%. They gave him 23%, which means the Northerners voted more, Northwest, the North together voted more for Tinubu than actually the whole South. I didn't say he will not win the election. What I said is that he's going to find it very, very, very difficult to be returned in his second term because there's so much work he has to do in the next 2 years that he hasn't done in the first 2 years. Which was why all these hurried endorsements are diversionary and damaging to his ambition. You might actually think he's home and dry. He's not. The real task for President Tinubu lies ahead. Now in the North, we hear people saying, oh, we'll vote for him out in 2027. That's 2 years from now. He can still fix a lot of the things he's doing wrong. And maybe improve his chances for being endorsed in the part of the country, which I know, the North. The funny thing is, the governors who endorsed him know this too.
You say that the people of the North have decided, or majority of them have decided, that they will not vote for the president in 2027. And the governors know this.
They know. The governors are isolated as well. I mean, the truth is that the party cycle around the governors is so is so parochial and so self-serving that they are likely to tell them, like the governors are telling the president, that the North has nobody else but you. Their people are also likely to tell them, oh, everybody is happy with you, Your Excellency. You are the best governor that ever happened in this country. So we know some things that the governors don't know because we're not that isolated.
But while the North is unhappy with the president, are the people of the North also unhappy with the state of governance in the North under their governors?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, in Nigerian democracy, the people have no voice. Nobody cares about what the people think. Usually when you hear people speak for the people, they speak for the people. Media is controlled or completely ineffective, don't have very little civil society activity. And so governors get away with murder until they get voted out. And the reason why they don't really get voted out is they amass so much money that they use it to make sure that they come back in one way or the other. So I don't think that governors, even if they know, you think a governor would walk up, an APC governor would walk up to the president and say, Mr. President, I've come to tell you, you are extremely unpopular in my state, and you will not win. Somehow the APC as a party and the people are damaging themselves beyond what you can imagine. The idea that 21 governors or 7 governors from the Northwest could get together and say, let's endorse the president for a second term. Nobody should even dream of contesting with President Tinubu for the ticket of the APC. In our own case too, we endorse ourselves. We endorse every legislator. We endorse everybody who is even leaving his party, the defectors. We endorse everything. 2 years to an election. Does this suggest to you, like, these are governors who are interested in public opinion? This is what is happening. The level of sycophancy, the level of power and the arrogance centered around executive offices, governors, and the presidency is scary. It's very scary that people can do this with 2 years of hard work ahead. You said don't even aspire. What are they going to do with all these people who are defecting and running into their party? They are there so that they can contest on the platform of the APC. Some of them are actually very powerful people with a lot of money. Are you going to tell them, sorry, we endorsed ourselves 2 years ago, so you cannot compete here? They don't even understand what it is to manage these defectors. In the next 2 years, they will know the result of all these bulging numbers that they have in the party. I think on the whole, unfortunately, APC as a party doesn't have a thinking process within. Otherwise, they are making an elementary mistake that they have no business making. You are government, you are a governing party, you have a huge amount of work, you've been stampeded into beginning a campaign that you have no business being involved in. You should focus on governance. Even, of course, you should keep an eye on elections, but focus on governance. The opposition has succeeded in stampeding them into now conducting an election. 2 years before an election, you say nobody should contest our seats. Nobody should aspire to be a National Assembly member or State Assembly member because we've all endorsed ourselves. What kind of politics is this? And you think Nigerians, people, ordinary citizens will be happy with this kind of thing?
I'd like to thank you very much for coming to speak with me on Political Paradigm. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me too. Happy June 12th.
Yeah, same to you. Same to you. Well, that's all the time we have in Political Paradigm. Thanks for your time. I've been speaking with Dr. Hakeem Baba-Ahmed, former spokesperson to the Northern Elders Forum and former special advisor on politics to the president. If you'd like to catch this episode and more, please go to YouTube and search Political Paradigm. Alternatively, go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Kumi. Goodbye.